The house stood still, a quiet suburban sanctuary where Mommy moved through her days as a wife and mother, her life stitched together by routine. The sun poured through wide windows, bathing the rooms in a golden glow that softened the edges of her world. She was a woman carved by years of care, her hands adept at folding laundry, her voice steady when soothing her children, her heart tethered to a husband who filled the spaces of their home with familiarity. Yet beneath her calm surface, a restlessness simmered, unnamed and unclaimed, waiting for something to give it shape. It found her in the guest room one afternoon. She'd been carrying a stack of fresh towels, her bare feet padding silently across the hardwood, when she paused at the open door. Daniel was there, her husband's younger brother, a guest for a few days, a man whose presence had always lingered at the edges of her awareness. He stood with his back to her, shirtless, tugging a clean tee over his head. The motion stretched the muscles of his shoulders, and for a fleeting second, before the fabric settled, she glimpsed the taut plane of his skin, bronzed, smooth, alive in a way that struck her like a match against dry wood. Her breath caught a sharp little hitch she barely noticed, and then his head turned. Their eyes locked. The moment stretched, heavy and unspoken. His gaze held hers, not with intent, not with words, but with a quiet heat that seeped into her bones. She felt exposed, as if he could see the pulse flickering at her throat, the sudden warmth blooming beneath her ribs. She clutched the towels tighter, a shield against the tremor in her chest, and stepped back, letting the doorframe break their line of sight. But the spark had landed. It smoldered there, deep in her gut, a forbidden ember she couldn't stamp out. Later, in the kitchen, the air thickened with something new. She stood at the counter, slicing vegetables for dinner, the knife's rhythm a steady anchor to her unraveling thoughts. Daniel wandered in, casual in his movements, reaching for a glass from the cabinet above her. His arm brushed hers, just a graze, the faintest press of skin against skin, and it was as if lightning arced through her. Her hand faltered, the blade nicking the cutting board, and she froze. The sensation lingered, a phantom touch that traced up her arm and settled in her spine, radiating outward until her whole body hummed. She didn't look at him, couldn't, but she felt his nearness, the warmth of him, the faint scent of soap and something earthier, something that tugged at her senses like a thread pulled too tight. Her mind churned, a storm of guilt and want. Her husband's face flashed before her, steady, kind, the man who'd built this life with her. She saw the gold band on her finger, glinting in the sunlight, a silent vow she'd worn for years. But beneath that weight, another current surged, raw and unbidden. Daniel was forbidden, a line she'd never dared to cross, a shadow cast by her husband's blood. Yet her body betrayed her, awakening in ways she hadn't felt in too long. Her skin prickled, hyper-aware of every shift in the room, the creak of the floor as he stepped closer, the soft exhale of his breath as he filled his glass at the sink. She wondered if he felt it too, this charged silence that pressed against her ribs, or if she was alone in her unraveling. The knife resumed its work, slower now, her hands trembling faintly as she fought to steady herself. But her thoughts wouldn't settle. They circled back to that glimpse in the guest room, the curve of his spine, the way his body moved with an ease that felt dangerous. She imagined the heat of his skin under her fingertips, the forbidden weight of it, and a flush crept up her neck, pooling in her cheeks. Guilt gnawed at her, sharp and insistent, but it couldn't drown the ache that pulsed lower, a quiet throb that grew with every breath. She pressed her thighs together, a futile attempt to quell it, and the air grew heavier still, thick with the scent of cut peppers and the unspoken. He lingered, leaning against the counter, sipping his water. She stole a glance, his jawline sharp, his lips parted just enough to draw her eye, and her heart stumbled. The pull was undeniable now, a current dragging her toward him, step by silent step. Her husband was upstairs, the kids outside, and yet here she stood, tethered to this moment, her body alive with a hunger she couldn't name. The brush of his arm replayed in her mind over and over, a touch so brief it shouldn't have mattered, but it did. It unraveled her thread by thread, until she was a woman split in two, loyalty on one side, desire on the other, and no clear path between. She turned away, focusing on the vegetables, the task, the life she knew. But the ember burned on, fed by every fleeting glance, every accidental nearness. Daniel was a secret she hadn't meant to keep, a shadow moving through her sunlit home. And as she stood there, caught in the tension of her own making, she knew the spark had already taken root. It was only a matter of time before it flared. Below is part 2 of your sensual story, crafted to approximately 5,500 characters, including spaces and punctuation, weaving erotic tension with emotional depth from Mommy's perspective. It follows your summary, emphasizing sensations, inner reactions, and atmosphere with minimal dialogue. The house felt different that evening, its quiet edges sharpened by the storm rolling in from beyond the suburban sprawl. Mommy stood alone in the kitchen, her husband's absence a hollow space that echoed through the room. He'd left for the night, some errand, some obligation, and the kids were tucked away at a neighbor's. The air hummed with a restless energy, thick and electric, as if the world outside knew what simmered within. She'd felt it all day, that pull toward Daniel, a thread stretched taut since the guest room, since the brush of his arm. Now, with the house empty save for him, it snapped. He was in the living room, sprawled on the couch, the flicker of a muted television casting shadows across his. She paused in the doorway, a glass of water in her hand, an excuse she didn't need. The storm growled low, a rumble that vibrated through the floor, and her pulse quick. She crossed the threshold, her bare feet silent on the carpet, and stopped beside him. He looked up, his eyes catching hers, and the air shifted, charged, alive, a mirror to the chaos outside. Her breath hitched, and before she could think, her hand moved. Her fingers grazed his chest, tentative at first, then lingering, pressing against the firm warmth beneath his shirt. Time slowed, the world narrowing to that point of contact, and she felt the shudder that ran through him, a silent answer to her unspoken. His hand caught hers, holding it there, and then he rose, closing the space between them. Their eyes locked, and the storm's first crack split the silence as his lips found her. The kiss was heat and hunger, a collision that unraveled her in an instant. Her glass slipped, water splashing cold against her feet, but she barely noticed. His mouth moved against hers, firm and searching, and she surrendered to it, her hands sliding up his shoulders, fingers curling into. The taste of him, salt and need, flooded her senses, and a sound escaped her, a soft moan swallowed by the thunder. They stumbled backward, a tangle of limbs and want, until the carpet met her. The living room floor stretched beneath them, a forbidden stage lit by the storm's erratic flashes. He pulled her down, and she went willingly, her body pressed to his, the weight of him a rebel. His breath grazed her neck, hot and uneven, and her skin prickled, every nerve alight. She arched into him, her hands roaming, tracing the lines she'd only imagined, the dip of his spine, the taut stretch of muscle beneath her palm. The storm's rhythm pulsed through her, a wild echo of her racing heart, and she felt the world tilt, her senses drowning in him. Cloth gave way, his shirt tugged free, her own slipping down her shoulders, and the press of bare skin against bare skin sent a jolt through. Her thighs parted, instinct overriding thought, and he settled between them, his hardness a promise that drew a gasp from her lips. The air grew heavy, thick with their mingled breaths, and she felt the ache within her deepen, a hollow begging to be. His hands were everywhere, gripping her hips, sliding up her sides, igniting trails of fire, and she met him with her own, nails grazing his back, a claim she couldn't voice. The storm roared, rain lashing the windows, and it was as if the chaos outside fueled them, urging her further into the. When he entered her, slow and deliberate, the world fractured. A cry caught in her throat, swallowed by the sensation, fullness, heat, a stretch that blurred pain. Her body tightened around him, every inch of her alive with the feel of him, and she rocked against him, chasing the wave that built within. His breath was ragged now, a warm pulse against her ear, and she felt the shift, the moment he surrendered. The rhythm grew urgent, a dance of flesh and need, and her mind spun, guilt dissolving beneath the tide. Her husband's shadow flickered, faint and distant, but it could not here, not now, with Daniel's weight anchoring her to this raw, pleasure crested, sharp and blinding, and she shattered beneath him, her body trembling as it washed through her. He followed, a low groan vibrating against her skin, and they clung together, sweat-slick and spent, the storm's fury a fading. She lay there, chest heaving, the carpet rough against her back, and felt the shift within her, a reshaping, a new contour to her soul. The secrecy of it bound them, a thread woven through the silence that settled. His hand rested on her stomach, a quiet claim, and she stared at the ceiling, the afterglow mingling with a deeper ache. She'd crossed the line, surrendered fully to the forbidden, and there was no. The storm quieted, but the stakes within her deepened, a tangle of desire and consequence she couldn't yet unravel. For now, she let it be, let the warmth of him linger, let the moment. The house stood still again, but she was changed, tethered.